Welcome to Purple Rose Crafts. Today we're going to be learning the basics of a granny square blanket or granny stripe blanket. And today we're going to be using our Bernat Pop yarn. It's a 4 on this scale and it recommends a 5mm crochet hook, and we're actually going to use a 4.5 because it's one of my favorites and I like my stitches to just be a little bit tighter when I'm crocheting. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here with a slip knot, and what we're going to do is start with our chain row. So in this case, for this blanket, we're going to do chain multiples of 3 plus our 2 for our initial double crochets. You'll want to make the chain row for this blanket a little bit smaller than you actually think it should be because it increases in all directions as we start working it. We want to make sure that our chain row is not too big, otherwise we're going to end up with a very long rectangular blanket. We're actually starting with is 23 chains because we need multiples of 3, so that'll give us 7 bunches on each side plus our 2 for our initial double crochet. Now we're going to start our first double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook. So we go 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to double crochet into that one. And we're going to actually add 2 here into that initial one. The 2 chains we skipped from our hook are going to make it a 3rd double crochet. All right. Now we're going to skip 2 chains. So we're going to skip 1 and 2 and do 3 double crochets into this one here, the 3rd one over again. You don't need to put a chain to make this space. It will naturally happen when you skip those bottom chains. Okay, and we're going to continue in this fashion to the end of the row. So 3 double crochets, skip 2, 3 double crochets in the 3rd, and continue around. And yes, your work will curl up as you are working in this chain row. It's inevitable for most of us anyways. Once you get going though, it should flatten out. When you do your corners properly, it'll actually become nice and flat. So we're going to continue skipping 2 and then doing 3 double crochets into the 3rd. Okay, so at this point we are down to the end of the row. We have all of our little granny bunches here, and what we're going to do is we're going to skip our last 2 and we're going to start working into the last chain from the row. In order to do that and make a corner, we're going to crochet 6 double crochets for one corner and then another 6. So we actually have to put 12 double crochets into this one chain from the foundation row. So there's our 12. So we want 12 double crochets into the corner. This just looks like a circle right now, but it will straighten out once we get our second row worked on top of it. So kind of a neat, a little tip here as I'm working with my tail here from my slip knot, what I will often do is I will start to work it into my work at this point. So I will just start working my double crochets over it as I go now along this kind of chain row again. We're going to work back across the chain row here on the other side. Now in this case, we do have a couple of options. If you like the way that it looks, you can do your next granny square cluster right into the space between the rows of the other side of the row. So you can go directly over the chains from the bottom and just go into that space, and then you'd work the next one over into the next space. So it does look a little bit bunched at the corner, but once you get the whole like more on the blanket, it won't look so odd. Okay, so it doesn't actually look like a whole lot quite yet. Once we get around to the next row, it will look even better than this. So now you've got your clusters from this row and your clusters from this row kind of going into the spaces. So this is an option. So the other option is we can go in through the opposite of the cluster from the first side of the row. We're just going to loop over both of those chains and just go right into the same kind of hole that we've made from the first one, the cluster from the other side. So that's gonna just make things look just a little bit differently from the other option. And you can definitely choose which one you like to do better. Only on this first row will it matter. Once we're kind of into the meat of the blanket, it won't make a difference. Everything's going to be the same. It just gives a little bit more of a space over here on this side. All right, let's do one more. The only thing with this one is that you might end up leaving those spaces at the bottom of the clusters as you go. So this is the other option here. So you can do whichever you prefer. That's just our tail there, so I'll pull that out of the way and see which one you like there. Right, so I'm just continuing to chain over top of my tail end here, and then when we turn the blanket over, you really can't see it. It's worked in there, and at this point, only about 2 inches or so does it even really matter. Once it's in, like kind of weaved in through 2 inches, then we can just cut it off. We don't need to continue working it under our stitches. Now we're using a self-striping yarn, but you always have the option of deciding which when you want to change and when you want to stripe. When you're using a self-striping yarn, as your rows get bigger, like as your blanket gets bigger and your rows get longer, your stripes will get smaller. So it depends on what look you're going for. So there's been blankets that I've made that I've been completely random in my changing of colors, and that is kind of one of those really random looking blankets, but it is lovely. The other option is you can do like a specific stripe pattern where you do say like 2 rows of one color and then 2 rows of a different color, and you continue around like that. That's an option. Or you can do, honestly, the possibilities are endless as far as color changing options. You can always decide later, as you're kind of going, when you want to change colors. It's always a good idea to kind of have an idea in your mind when you're working on it. I often like the look of just one single row of a single color of granny like bunches, granny stripes. It does look really sweet when you kind of are changing colors and all you get is this like little cute just bunch, and then all of a sudden the next row is a different color. It's very sweet. So that's always a possibility. Really, I have probably made, I don't know, at least 20 of these blankets, and they've all been completely different because I just had an idea and went with it. So, your crocheting can be a lot of that. Your creativity, it can definitely, change with the seasons, and every time you do the same pattern, you can do it completely differently, and so it turns out a different way. All right, so let's continue. What we're doing, okay, we've come to the corner. So what we're showing is how we can get around the corner this time. Now we're coming up to the end of the row. So here's our chains from our first row. We're going to crochet into this space here at the bottom, and we're going to put 6 double crochets into that to make our corner. So 6 double crochets makes a corner in all of our rows. Okay, so we're going to do our 6. 3. And 6. Perfect. All right, there's our 6. And so now we need to make another corner to get around this first cluster. So what we're going to do is we're going to crochet into the first, like right here, into the first chain and do another 6 double crochets. This is going to prevent us from joining our work up at the end of the row and then having to start again with a double crochet. We're turning it into a spiral as opposed to a specific rowed pattern. Okay, so there we have our next corner, and our space between them is actually going to be here, but it doesn't really look like anything yet until we get all the way around. Okay, so now this bunch actually looks like just 2, but that's okay. We're just going to continue. So now working our second row, we're going to work into all the spaces between each cluster from the row below. Okay, ignore all the chains in the top and all this loop here. We're going over all of it. And we're going to do that in every cluster, and just whatever you do, if you decide to you know, catch these 2 chains and skip that kind of like bottom one here, just be consistent. That's the only kind of tip that I have for this section of the blanket. You just want to make sure that everything is the same. You don't want to be you know, kind of changing things up as you go through the blanket. Here, I'll show you. All right, so if we catch this loop here on the bottom of each of our stitches as we did here in the first 2 clusters, it just looks a little bit cleaner. In the third one here, I did skip it, and it just gives, you can just see it, that's all. Either way is fine, as long as you are consistent and you do the same thing every time, it doesn't matter. Okay. So just for consistency's sake, I'm going to go back and double crochet over that. And of course, as you just saw, taking apart your work if you made a mistake is quite easy. What I will often do is I will often stick my hook in the stitch I need to pull back to, so I don't go any further than that. And that way it will stop when I get my hook to that point. That is helpful to make sure we don't go too far back. Now, if you have to pull out a couple of rows, that's fine. Just be aware of where you need to stop when you're going to rip it back out. And this really can almost become a little bit mindless as you're working, and once you kind of get the hang of it, your fingers will find the next space and your crochet hook will know where to go. I've been doing, well, I'm pretty sure that this is one of the first kind of projects I learned on as a kid, probably like around 14, 15 years old. I learned how to do a granny stripe blanket, and it really became second nature. I made, as I said, probably close to 20 of these, and over time it just became second nature to kind of feel for the hole, and then when you stopped feeling a hole, you knew you were at a corner, so it's time to pay attention again. Anyways, we are at the corner, so we're going to skip our 3 stitches here, and we're going to go into between the 4th, and now we're doing 6 double crochets as we do for every single corner as we're going around. So 6 double crochets here, And my work naturally turns as I'm going to continue to work into the same hole. There we have 6. That's 6. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to skip our 3. So now what's actually going to happen is we're going to create these clusters along the end of the row as well. This is the first time this is happening. So we're going to skip our 3. We're going to go into the center here. So we're going to do 3 double crochets in the middle between our 2 corners, and that's going to create a cluster. And then we're going to skip 3 again and go into, and this is another corner. So we're going to do 6 in this one. So 5 and 6. All right, and now we're just going to skip to the next cluster and continue down the next side. And that is basically it for the granny square blanket. Basically, we're going to continue doing this fashion until the blanket gets as large as we want it to be. And I will come back and we can talk about borders and things like that at that point. So I will link a pattern to this, a written pattern for my blog, in the description below. You can check that out. And if you, of course, make any of these projects, if you make this project, tag us on our Instagram feed at purple.rose.crafts. And we will share those pictures to our stories, because I love to see what you guys are creating from our videos and from our patterns that we're posting on the blog. Okay, so just let me know what you want to see in the next video in the comments below, or if you need clarification on any of these sections.